sitting here deciding on a title, and since a topic, and since Sunday is Mother's Day, I just kind of popped off and said, "Oh, let's talk about if it's not one thing, it's your mother." And so it was kind of a funny thing, and I was just going to talk about mothers and how the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, how important mothers are. I think we all know that. But I started doing some research on the mother-daughter struggle. And I was very surprised at what I came up with. That one of the things that a therapist, Julie, and I'm having trouble pronouncing her last name, Judy Crickle. She was is a therapist back east and runs a women's center, and she said she was baffled at working with mothers and daughters. That she really didn't know how to work with them. If they would come and they would work and they'd work and there'd be no progress. And then she had different therapist friends coming to her talking about how can we help mothers and daughters. What they do is, they teach them communication skills, they teach them healthy boundaries, and all that was good. But it still was not helping the coupleship, the mother and daughter coupleship. And so this therapist has made it actually her life's work to research that mother-daughter struggle and what she found, and she's not the only one. I mean, I looked up a lot on mother-daughter struggle. And she even formulated an assessment on attachment disorder that is geared just for mothers and daughters. So there's Miss Jackie joining. She's got some daughters. So anyway, what this therapist in her research, she just has made it her life's work. She also, I don't have the book, but I'm going to order it. And she wrote the book, The Mother-Daughter Puzzle. The Mother-Daughter Puzzle, if y'all are interested in that. I always like to give people credit where credit's due. And that she was the main one that I got information from. And she said it was just baffling to her when she started doing the research. And like I said, she went across generations, she went across nationality, she went across every form of a mother-daughter relationship. And the common denominator was what she came out with, is that mothers and daughters have conflict, period. They have conflict. And, therapists have blamed it in mothers and daughters have blamed it on, okay, the daughter's 13, 14, so it's her hormones is the reason they can't get along. And then, the daughter gets older and she is pregnant for the first time. Well, it's her hormones because she's pregnant. That's the reason the daughter can't get along with the mother. Then the mother starts going through menopause, and it's her hormones. Well, the reason they can't get along is because mother's going through the change. And then they get to my age and there's still a hormone problem. Old people don't have any, so it is, they finally decided hormones is not the cause. It may have, contribute somewhat, to our behavior and all, but it's not the cause of the mother-daughter conflict. And so then they looked at, another thing is that, no communication skills. So like I said earlier, they really worked, all these therapists was going to work on teaching mothers and daughters how to communicate. That has not been successful, or to the therapist in working with, mothers and daughters. And then boundaries, that was the big thing, teaching them to set boundaries, healthy boundaries. That's what we do here. We talk about boundaries. And so, to what this therapist came up with and what she teaches and what's in her book is what we teach here at Shades of Hope every single solitary day. And that is what each person, each partner of any relationship has to work on their own core issues. Daughters have to work on their core issues. Mothers have to work on their core issues. What usually daughters want to do is look at mothers and blame them for all of the problems that the daughters have. Or the mothers want to look at the daughters and criticize and condemn, and it can even be a look. My daughters can say, I have a look, that if I have the look, that I don't even have to say anything, that I have a look of disapproval. And what I want to say, get over yourselves. But anyway, that is really what this therapist is saying. Each partner, the mothers and the daughters that have conflict, have got to get past themselves. And how they get past themselves is, and I know this stuff, I teach it, but it's hard. I have 3 daughters, and it's hard to sometimes practice what you preach. And our relationships, my relationships with my 3 daughters are much better than they've ever been. They've each had to go off and do their own work and come back, and we've had to do work together. And they're in their 50s, and I'm in my 80s, and so we still have some mother-daughter conflict. I don't know that it'll ever be totally resolved. But what I'm excited about is we're not the only ones. Misery loves company. And I was talking to our clinical director the other day and about this. I called her when I was putting this talk together, and she said that of all the clients that she's ever had, the ones that she's had the least success with, is people who come to her for that mother-daughter struggle. Because what it is, the daughters want the mothers to change. Because the mother has spent a lifetime, a lot of times, the mothers have spent a lifetime putting their expectations on the daughters. And now it's coming back that the daughters are putting their expectations on their mothers. And bottom line, her name is Susie Stuckey. She's our clinical director here. She said, Teddy, I have been in this business for years, and the ones that baffle me the most, the clients, are the mothers and daughters struggle. And she said, I have worked with you and your daughters. She used to work for us 35 years ago. She said, I have known y'all forever. And I have worked with many families, mothers and daughters, in Abilene, Texas. And she said, without much success, unless each party will look at their own issues. She said, until each one can look, and this is what this therapist was saying. She called it the root, that we each have to get to the root of the real problem. Others call it the core. That's what we call it here. Get to the core problem, to the core of it. And one of the ways that is recommended to do this is look back 3 generations. And one of my daughters did this. Kim did this at some point. But anyway, one of the things that this therapist is saying is go back 3 generations of mothers. And if they're all alive, if you're fortunate enough for your mother to be alive, and your grandmother to be alive, and your great-grandmother to be alive, or someone in their generation that's alive, go back and interview each one of them. And it's best if you can interview them face to face. If not, there's every kind of electronic gizmo that you can interview them, Zoom, talk, whatever. But interview these women. And in interviewing them, ask about their lives. Ask about their relationship with their mothers. Because we're going to get pretty much what they got. it may look a little different, but that is what's passed on from generation to generation. So interview your mother and ask your mother what her relationship with her mother was like. And then if your grandmother's alive, go back and talk to your grandmother about what her relationship with her mother was like. I get surprised sometimes. I mean, my friend Misty always tells me that I give everybody the mini interview. You know, everyone that's real close to me calls me Minnie, that I give everyone the mini interview. And I've been doing that. I've been inquisitive all my life, and I've asked questions. I've asked people questions, probably that I didn't even need to ask, but I've always asked questions. I've always wanted to know how other families operated. I always was particularly interested in how mothers and daughters, you know, growing up. And so it's about going and interviewing your mother. Ask the hard questions. Ask how her childhood was. And then go to your grandmother if she's still alive. Ask her the same questions. And then if you have a great grandmother, she may be 90, go ask her. But I was very inquisitive. And I would have, you know, the little time I only had one grandmother, and I only got to spend a little amount of time with her. I won't bore y'all with my childhood. I've worn y'all out with telling about my childhood. It was not a very happy time in my life. But anyway, I was inquisitive, and I knew more about my mother's life than I knew about mine, because I wanted to know what it was like for her growing up. And she had a sad, awful life. She was an orphan. Her mother died when she was a little girl. She had to take care of two little siblings. Her dad went off and left them. I mean, it was a sad life. Well, I picked up my mother's sadness, and I carried her sadness I felt so sorry for my mother. And then her mother had died. And I had an opportunity to talk with a cousin anyway, it's generations down, that knew about, she was much older than me, and she knew about our grandmother. Our grandmother's name was Tenny. That's where I got my name. And she knew some things about Tenny. And she told me, and that's my grandmother. And that's the one that died in childbirth and left my mother an orphan plus 9 other kids. But what she told me about Tenny is that she had a very hard life, that she had an abusive father who sexually abused her. She married a man who was abusive to her till the day she died. And my cousin said that her mother told her that probably her mother was glad that she died because she had such a hard life. So it's generational. It's a generational problem. And if you want to find some answers, go back generations and then bring it up. And I was talking about my daughter Kim. I think it's when she was in treatment or sometime, she called and interviewed me. And to my knowledge, she's really the only one that has to that extent. I have granddaughters. And it always surprises me that they don't ask me more questions, because I was always asking anyone that I knew about our family. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But anyway, what was blamed on hormones, was really not the problem. What was blamed on lack of communication or lack of boundaries was really not the problem. What the problem is people get hurt. People get hurt along the way in childhood. I don't know of anyone, particularly people that I've hung out with or people that I've treated, I don't know of anyone that has actually escaped childhood without some kind of hurt or pain from particularly their mothers. And it talked about sons. Somehow this doesn't affect sons. Sometimes a few sons it will affect, particularly if they don't have daughters. If they have only sons, sometimes the sons will be affected by their mothers. But it's mainly, and what I'm talking about today is mainly the mother-daughter struggle. And so this woman, this therapist that I'm talking about, developed this model, this attachment model, over 20 years ago about the attachment model that is geared just to mothers and daughters. And I could see so plainly about how in my own life, how complicated, oh, there is my friend Mickey. My goodness alive, how way, good to see you, Mickey. She fell and hurt her face, and I don't see any bad things on your face this morning. It's good to see you. But anyway, what I was talking about is, let me go back, is we have a lot of mothers and daughters have complicated dynamics. They are complicated. And what daughters want to do many times is blame it on the mothers. And of course they do. My situation, and it is unique and different in that I became my mother's mother. My mother was so ill, she could not do any mothering. And so my mother literally took me hostage, and it is that enmeshment. It was not, it was totally, we were one person, enmeshment. And I made a decision early in my life that I was not going to have that type of relationship with my daughters, because the message that I got, very loud and clear, it wasn't a silent message, it was said out loud by my mother almost on a daily basis from the time I was a little girl. If you leave me, I will die. If you leave me, you're the only one that loves me. You're the only one that understands me. You're the only one that takes care of me. And it was the truth to the day she died. I have a sister. I had a sister 3 years older. She disengaged herself from the family many years before my mother became elderly. Anyway, y'all know a lot about my family history. So I made a decision early on, and before I ever had children, that I was not going to let my children get overly attached to me to where they would carry that burden that they had to take care of their mother. So consequently, I did the opposite. And I raised my children with outstretched arms. Like, in some ways that is healthy. I think I took it maybe to the extreme, but it's about, we do need to teach our children, to teach them, okay, now y'all go on out there and live your life. We need to teach them independence. What I missed was we need to bring them close. We need to bring them close those first few years, which I did, but I don't think that my babies ever felt that closeness because of my own fear of it, that I would engulf them. So we're to bring our children close, then we need to let them go. And what I started doing from the day mine were born, I started letting them go. You know, my deal, I was going to teach them everything they needed to know to grow up and be functioning women. And I have a son too, but because I had to learn from neighbors, I had to learn from myself, I had to learn reading books, I had to learn by going to church and women at the church feeling sorry. I don't know if they felt sorry for me, but they really took me under their wing. I learned how to set tables by going to church. I didn't know how to set a table. So by the grace of God, God put some healthy women in my life and taught me some things about life. And I was a seeker. I wanted to know. So consequently, I raised my children, particularly my daughters, with outstretched arms. And so consequently, I think that sometimes they have felt that lack of attachment to me. So this can work both ways, over attachment or detachment. And that's what this therapist said. And she's made it her life's work. And I'm just so glad I did this research, because like I said, I was just going to do this little talk about kind of flip it. If it's not one thing, it's your mother. But in doing this research, it's a universal problem. like I said a while ago, across every generation, nationality, from the Indians to China to you name it. Each one has their own different cultures, but basically there can be problems with mothers and daughters, that conflict. And so what it does is when you do these interviews with your mother, your grandmother, and great-grandmother, ask about their self-worth, ask about their self-esteem. How do they feel good about themselves? Where do they get their good feelings about themselves? How did they get their good feelings about themselves in childhood? What about their spiritual upbringing? Who was it that taught them about God? Was there any spiritual upbringing in their home? Ask the right questions. Ask about how they learned about the facts of life, all of that. Just interview them and ask about affection. How was affection giving? So interview your mom. There's this, because this everything gets passed down, good, bad, and indifferent. I don't care how we look at it, it's going to be passed down. There's this story about, and I usually tell it every Thanksgiving, but anyway, or Easter, there was this mother and daughter that went to shopping it was really for Easter. And so they went to the butcher part of the store, and the mother ordered a ham. And her adult daughter was standing there, and the mother had the butcher to cut the end off the ham. And so they went on, got the ham, and went on through the grocery store. And her daughter said, "Mother, why do you have the end cut off of that ham?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. My mother always did. I just saw her do it. I just always have the end cut off of the ham." So Easter came around. Grandmother was there, and the daughter asked the granddaughter, she said, "Granny, why, when you bought the ham, why would you have the end cut off of it?" And she said, "Well, the pot that I had to cook the ham in wasn't big enough for a whole ham, so I'd have it cut off, and then I'd have enough, I'd freeze one part of it, and I'd have enough for 2 meals because the pot was too small." That is how silly some of these traditions are handed down from daughters to mothers. And that is kind of a funny one and a light one, but some of them are not. Some of them are not. I'm in the eating disorder field, and I read some things that I didn't like about how mothers can pass on eating disorders. I know it, I've known it, I study it, I've taught it, and I know it, and I've done this to my own daughters. Our generation, my generation, that lasted up until not very many years ago, there was a lot about lookism. It was a lot about the body. It was a lot about the size of the body. You're too thin, you need to gain some weight, or you're overweight, or have you gained some weight? You better watch that. This is messages that mothers give daughters. And I was going to be very careful with my daughters and not say anything about their bodies, because the mother that raised them weighed almost 300 pounds. That's when I weighed 287 pounds, but then they would watch me constantly be on a diet. And they would watch me constantly I'd go on those strict diets, and I'd get irritable, restless, and discontented because I was starving myself so I could lose weight, so I could look better. And I would, and I'd lose that 100 pounds, 130 pounds, get everybody in church on that diet, because they'd say, "Oh, you're losing weight, what'd you do?" And they might need to lose 30 or 40. I'd give them the diet, they'd lose it and go on about their merry way, and I would gain it back. I did that 5 different times. I would lose it and gain it. That is what I taught my daughters, is to, take laxatives, take diet pills, do this, do harmful things to your bodies. No wonder my daughters some of them have problems with body image. They have had problems with eating disorders, and is it a direct result of what they learned? Did I ever tell them outright? Probably. I don't know. One of the biggest jokes with our kids tell when they get together is, we had a big old house, and I might be upstairs, and My daughter Kim's always been extremely thin. Karen and Christy were built like me. They were not overweight, but I've never wanted one of my kids to be overweight. That was one of my biggest fears. But I would be upstairs and I could hear, and Karen would be probably the only one, but I could hear Karen taking the lid off of the cookie jar and it's scraping kind of the lid against the cookie jar. I would be upstairs and I could hear that and I would holler down, Karen Lee, get out of the cookie jar. And I'd always know it was her because it was. And so when they get together, they laugh about that. That was damaging to her. That is about an eating disorder. And I would say things about their body size. And I'll spend the rest of my life making amends to them. But those are the things that we do because I wanted them to look a certain way so I would feel better. That's the bottom line. You know, I wanted my kids to be better than me, to look better than me. I had on my dad's side, my dad was weight conscious. And this is, you know, my dad was very open about, you know, my dad was very sick. He sexually abused me until I was 13 years of age, and I believe the only way he left me alone is because I started gaining weight, and I was always overweight, but I really gained. And I think on a conscious level, I did that. On an unconscious level, I did that, so he'd leave me alone. But anyway, my dad hated, I don't think he liked women. He loved sex, but I don't think he had any respect for women, and particularly anyone that was overweight, particularly women. He hated fat women, and he would tell that all of the time. So consequently, I was overweight. I knew he hated me, and I don't think he liked any women at all other than their bodies. So I grew up with a lot of skewed thinking about women and bodies and all of that. So back to this interview. Go interview your mother, your grandmother, and your great-grandmother if you can. Find out how they feel about their bodies. How do they take care of their bodies? Is lookism the number one thing? Is being thin? You know, do they call attention? And I have done this, and I've made amends and probably need to make more amends because I have one daughter that is very thin. And I will comment on her body, and that's just as bad as, you know, as unhealthy as commenting on someone that is not real thin. So anyway, it's about keep your mouth shut, set healthy boundaries. But anyway, the conflict between mothers and daughters, like I said, are society-wide. It's a society-wide dynamic that contributes to the relationship conflict. And so there was an article in today's Parent magazine. I used to take that Parent magazine when I was raising my kids. I'd read every word of it because I'd read everything so I could be the best parent in the world. But nevertheless, there was an article in Today Parent magazine. A woman related that all of her life, the main thing she could remember about her mother was always on a diet. That's probably what my kids remember, always on a diet. And another thing, she grew up when women during that period, and it's still, I mean, it has not changed much. It has changed some. We're more body aware than ever. You know, we know not to comment on a person's body or a child's body. Used to, it was free reign for anyone to say anything about anyone's body. We're taught today not to do that. Sometimes we do it anyway. And so she also reported the discussion of women's body was a large part of her life. This is a woman who was reporting about her own life. And she said talking about women's bodies was a large part. And she said the worst part of it, and oh, I have done this, that her mother would say how that she hated being overweight and she did not like overweight people because they were like her. And the daughter said, what did she do? She became morbidly obese. This is what the daughter said. And so the daughter also she became the worst thing that her mother had said. Just don't ever get overweight. That was the worst thing that her mother ever told her, and that was the thing that she did. And so another mother asked an adult daughter what she could have done better as a mother. One mother asked an adult daughter, what could I have done better as a daughter, as a mother? And what the daughter said was, you could have loved yourself better. You could have loved yourself more. And I think that's where we miss it. I didn't, I was determined that I was going to be a different mother and a better mother than I had. I was my own mother, Bless mother's heart. I will tell you, my mother was smart. She was brilliant. She was pretty. She was a bunch of men ran her for mayor one year in Odessa, Texas, and there was 5 men, and this was in 1950. And she came in second place in that mayor's race in 1950. So that said something about my mother and her quality. She did have a short period of time, probably 2-3 years, of sobriety. And during that short period of sobriety, my mother shone. I mean, she was brilliant. So when I talk about my mother, I don't mean to put my mother down. My mother was brilliant. She was beautiful. She would have been the mother that she wanted to be had it not been for the disease of alcoholism. That is what kept my mother from being a healthy mother. So I didn't mean to get into all of that, and maybe I needed to, because she gave me what she could, which wasn't much. But I made a decision. And y'all know about my experience in that little Southern Baptist church when I was 8 years old. I made a decision. I found Jesus Christ, invited him into my heart, and I knew from that point on, I didn't know what my life was going to be like, but I knew there was something greater than myself, and that my life was going to be all right. There was a lot of ups and downs. I mean, a lot of them. But anyway, I'm going to get back to my talk. I get sidetracked here. And because this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, mothers and daughters. But I want to repeat that. This adult daughter asked her mother, or no, the mother asked the adult daughter, what could I have done to have been a better mother? And what the mother said was, what the daughter said to the mother was, if you had loved yourself more. If you had loved yourself more. So what that says to me, when we love ourselves and we take care of ourselves and we know how to set healthy boundaries and we know that God is in charge, when we emulate that in our household, when we show that to our children and our grandchildren, that's what they learn. And, my children, I believe, they've gone back. We have done so much work on our relationships. We've had to, each one of them have had to come back in their own time frame and I want to say reconnect, but really connect to me in a different way through a healthy mother relation and a healthy daughter. They all had to get healthy enough, to do this mother-daughter deal. So, in closing, what I want to say is we each must do our own core work. If we don't do our own core work, we don't have anything to offer anyone, and we're going to have expectations so high that no one can meet them, particularly a mother and a mother-daughter relationship. What I want to say is, coming up on Mother's Day, honor your mothers, but also honor yourselves. Honor the mother inside of you. Because what we have to become, if we didn't have healthy mothering, in our childhood, we have to do our work around that and do our work around the losses. But at some point, we're going to have to look back at that stuff that happened to us, the pain, and a lot of sadness, a lot of hard things have happened to many of us in childhood. But instead of dragging it all the way through our adult life forever and always, amen, at some point we have to say, so what? That shouldn't have happened to a dog. But so what? Now what? And bring it up to today and say, now what? I'm a grown adult woman. I am responsible for the good in my life today, and I am responsible for the bad in my life. Whatever comes my way, I am responsible. It's not my mother's fault. It's not my grandmother's, my great-grandmother's. Yes, a lot of those things were handed down generationally, but it can stop in one generation. That's what we preach here. This stuff can stop in one generation. It can turn the corner. We don't have to continue to pass the sickness down from one generation to the other. And remember, what we mirror to the next generation is you can't give what you don't have. If you don't have it, you can't give it to them. And what it is I believe, is the love of God, the love of ourselves, and the love of others. When we put, I was, you look in the dictionary, it's actually in the dictionary now, the new edition, to codependency, you'd see my name beside of it. The way that I loved others first and foremost. I was a human doer, not a human being. I thought if I did enough for you and enough for your family, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but when you don't grow up in church, you don't know about churches. All I know, we were going to church here, that was 60 years ago, and I knew that when people died, the church people would take casserole dishes or something. I knew that. Well, bless my little heart, I would get the newspaper of a morning, and I would look to see who had died on the south side of town. I wouldn't even know them, and they wouldn't even be from the church where I attended. But I would, and I had a house full of kids, 7 kids, but I'd make them a casserole and take to them. I'd look up their, that's when we had phones, telephone books. I'd look up their address and take them a covered dish lunch. I had it, part of it down, but I exaggerated it. That's what adult children and alcoholics do. We do not know what normal is. We either overdo or underdo. I finally learned, and it was my pastor's wife that caught on to this, and she said, Tenny, why are you doing that? Because she went with me one day to deliver a casserole. She was the best pastor's wife, because she would spend time, like with newcomers, she would, drive around. She'd go with you to pick up your kid. Anyway, she'd get to know us. And so one day she was with me, and I was dropping off a casserole, and she said, now how do you know these people? And I said, well, I saw in the newspaper where her mother died, and I was just bringing her a casserole. She said, you mean you don't know her? I said, no, but isn't that what y'all do? And she patted me on the hand, and she said, honey, yes, but we do that to our church people. This is very sweet of you to do this, but you have 7 kids to feed. And anyway, I've learned a lot the hard way about, but I did meet a lot of those people, and some of them today I still know. We're all old, but I still see some of them, particularly at funerals today, because we're all at that age of going to funerals of each other. So anyway, this is passed down to generation. I'll give you 3 things or 4 things you might want to look at in dealing with your mother and daughters. That conflict is, I don't care how much core work you do, you're still going to have a mother, and you're still going to have, if you have daughters, you're going to have, and there's going to be conflict. But do your core work first. And that means let your mother off the hook. So one of the things is stay calm. Stay calm in the midst of conflict, especially. Listen to whatever each other has to say, and stay calm and keep your composure as much as you can. It's hard sometimes to do that, but in the middle of conflict, stay calm. The second thing is, don't hesitate to make amends. Don't hesitate. Maybe they played a much bigger part in, this is straight out of the 12 steps. They might have played much bigger part in whatever the conflict was than you did. It doesn't matter. Be the one to make amends. Be the one to get back together. And don't hesitate to reach out and make amends. And number 3, don't prejudge or misjudge. This is one of the things about, and this is place yourself in the shoes of your mother or in the shoes of your daughter. And one of the things, do not, and this came out from this therapist says, do not dislike each other's choice of friends because it's none of your business. Now, you don't have to be around their choice of friends if you don't want to. If they do things that's not in your value system, you don't have to be around them. You don't have to invite them into your home, but be cordial to them. And don't judge your daughters or your mothers for the friendships that they make, because it's none of your business. And you don't necessarily have to always be friends with your daughter's friends, nor vice versa. So, but here I go back on my own stuff. Because there was no inclusion, there was no one in our household, and my dad would always say the rule was you can't trust anyone outside that front door. Well, he had it backwards, we couldn't trust anyone inside the house. So I grew up knowing that I wanted a full household. I wanted people around. So I'm inclusive. I want people to come close. When our kids were growing up, we had a big old house and we built this huge playroom for the very reason to have people there. The kids could have people anytime they wanted to. I could never have a friend at my house, and I couldn't have friends because my mother didn't want me to have a friend, and she'd make up all bad stories about my friends and got one lady fired, all that stuff. I won't go into that. But anyway, I wanted people around. Our house was full. Then when we got into the program, every Saturday night, we'd invite everyone from that Saturday night meeting to our home. So I've always been inclusive. And maybe to a point sometime, I don't know. So the point to that is, don't misjudge or don't judge your mother or your daughter about their friends or their lifestyle. Mind your own business is probably what it boils down to. And see what side of you, try to see what is it in you that makes you want to judge your mother or makes you want to judge your daughter. What is it inside of us that makes us want to judge people that we love the very most? I've worked with clients and I have done this to my daughters early in their teen years. I wanted them to be everything that I wasn't. And when they left that house, I wanted them to look like they had stepped out of a bandbox. And they did. From the time they were born until they graduated from high school. I had one daughter that balked me on that. She would step out of the house looking like she'd, stepped out of a bandbox. But she would have different clothes at school to change into. And y'all all know her by the name of Kim. And her school pictures would not look anything like I had sent her to school. But anyway, that's become a family joke. But it was very important to me how my kids looked because it was a reflection on me. So ask yourself today, in today's time, what do you need from your mother? What do you need from your daughter? Ask yourself that. And respect the individuality of the special women in your life. We're all individuals, every one of us. Respect that special person in your life, even if she does things that you don't really like or that differs from you. It's none of your business. Love her anyway. If your daughter is living a lifestyle or, not going to church or going to church too much, whatever, none of that's any of your business. Just love them where they're at, unless they come and ask you, Mom, what do you think about this? Or, daughter, what do you think about this? Otherwise, it's none of your business. Keep your mouth shut. And you never know, that special person, those individuals, those special, lovely women that are in our lives. You never know. Perhaps her way is also correct. It's only different. It's correct for her. It's only different for us. And finally, always bring it back to this: love conquers all. Love each other for free and for fun. Enjoy the time you have together and be grateful for each other and how far you've come. And tell each other how grateful, and point out things that you're grateful for. And I want to go back to what that daughter said to her mother, that she wished she had loved herself more. Learn to love yourself. And remember what I said a while ago: we can't give away what we don't have. If we don't love ourselves and respect ourselves and find a life for ourselves, what do we have to give to others? And if we don't have a close relationship with the God of our understanding, and see, that shows, people know whether you do or not. You don't have to go around preaching to anyone. It's an attraction, not promotion. That's how the 12 steps are, and that's how it is in any church or spiritual body that I've ever been in. Yeah, churches want you to join, but it's still a lot of promotion. It's more about an invitation. So we can't give what we don't have. So love yourself, love others, put God first. That's what I have. So, all right, let's hear from y'all, because I know some mothers and daughters on here. And who wants